My name is Elizabeth Janzen, and I'm Assistant Professor of Flute at Texas A&M University, Kingsville. This video is part of a series of mini lessons designed to highlight practice techniques and approaches that you can use to better prepare for the 2014 Texas All-State auditions on the flute. Today we're going to take a look at the second Etude, number 35 in B-flat minor by Karg-Elert. Because of the time signature and the 30-second notes throughout this study, it can be a very daunting piece of music to begin. But because of that, I think it's a good idea to start your work with some dedicated rhythm work. Even though it's going to take time and patience, the good news is that once you do that work, you'll be able to feel the rhythms much more easily. But it's important that you learn to count them first so that you feel solid throughout the study with a good sense of pulse. My first piece of advice is to ignore the 4/8 in the time signature for now and focus on the 12/16. A 12/16 time signature means that there are going to be 12 counts in the bar, and each of those counts will be the length of a 16th note. So in other words, you're counting 12 16th notes per bar. The next step is to figure out what's the most commonly used rhythmic value in this piece. Luckily for us, I think that's pretty obvious because there's gazillions of them, and they're the 30-second notes. 30-second notes are twice as fast as 16th notes. So in other words, for every 1/16th note you want to count, there will be 2 30-second notes in that beat. Now we're ready to take a closer look at the music. So let's look carefully at the first bar. It's obviously much shorter than the other bars, and so we know that that must be some pickup notes. Luckily, the rhythms in that first bar are pretty straightforward. Remember, we said that the 16th note gets one beat in this piece, and right at the beginning of the piece, that first value is a 16th note. So that's our first beat right there. The following 4 notes are 30-second notes, and we can identify those because they're joined together by these 3 bars. And we said that 30-second notes go twice as fast as 16ths. So for every 2 30-second notes, we have 1 16th, which means that our next beat will use those 2 30-second notes, and then our next beat happens there. So in that pickup bar, we only have 3 beats to worry about. But don't forget, the 12/16 tells us that we're looking for 12 for our full bars. Now the next bar is pretty straightforward. There's a lot of 30-second notes in there, so we could just group in 2s. But we have to be careful because there are a couple of places where Karg-Elert gets a little sneaky, and he likes to add slower rhythms into the bar where they might be easily missed. So the first note, for example, instead of 3 bars, there's only 2 bars, which means that's a full 16th note. So that note gets 1 whole beat. Now we have our 3 bars back again, so we can mark every 2. And then this note is also a 16th note, just like this one. So it gets a full beat, and the next beat happens there. We have 30 seconds again, so we can mark every 2. Still 30 seconds, still 30 seconds, still 30 seconds. And then we come to this note. That B flat is an 8th note. If a 16th note gets 1 beat in this piece, an 8th note is equal to 2 16th notes, which means that this 8th note in this piece gets 2 counts. And then finally, we have a 16th note rest, which gets 1 count. So now we check our work. So we go back to the beginning of the bar. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Hooray! We found our 12 16th notes in that bar. And we can continue with that work throughout the piece. Now you see it can be kind of time consuming, but I highly recommend doing this work. Even though you're not going to be counting to 12 eventually, once it goes much faster, you want to have the confidence in your performance that you know where every beat fits in. Once you've put in all of your beats with those dashes like I have, we're going to group those a little bit. And at this point, we can return to look at the 4/8 that happens in parentheses. What the composer is trying to tell us is that he'd like you to group the beats so that there are 4 groups in each bar. So that requires a little bit of math, sorry. We have 12 beats, and we want to divide those beats into 4 groups. 12 divided by 4 is 3. That means that each group that we're going to be feeling is going to have 3 notes in it. Or in other words, there will be 4 groups in each bar of 3 beats. So what I do is I put a big beat at the beginning of each group, and then I count 1, 2, 3. The next group will start here. 1, 2, 3. The next group starts here. 1, 2, 3. The next group starts here. Let's count our groups. 1, 2, 3, 4. Fabulous. There's our 4 groups. And you work your way carefully through the piece. It's going to end up having a lot of pencil marks on your music. And eventually, when you feel more comfortable after we've worked with the metronome, like we will in a minute, you'll be able to erase these marks. You won't have to look at them all the way up until the Texas All-State auditions. But it's a good idea to start this way so that it's really, really clear for when you're practicing and you're confident working with the metronome that you're using the correct rhythms. So now let's take a look at how we can add our metronome to this practicing. Okay, so once you've marked all of your beats and you've marked your groups, you're ready to start with the metronome. Now, you want to go really slowly at first because this is a hard study to read. There's a lot of information on the page. And if you haven't watched my mini lesson on patterns in this movement, I would recommend you do that now because that's going to help you identify some of the notes. So I'm going to put my metronome on 16th note equals 60. So that means every beat, and we have 12 beats per bar, every beat will go at 60 on the metronome. I'm just going to work up until the end of the first full bar, just until I get those notes in my fingers. Don't forget to count the rest at the beginning. We go. And if your metronome is able to play a meter, you can also play with that. Put it on a meter of 3 so that every 3 beats, or at the beginning of every group, your metronome accents. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Yes, this is going to take a long time, and you probably won't have to go this slowly for very long once you get the notes in your fingers and you've really begun to understand how the rhythm work goes. But it's a good idea to go this slowly at first because your fingers are memorizing as well as your brain, and you want to give them a chance to catch up. I would work the tempo up still with the beat counting 16th notes a good ways, maybe up until 120 or 150. And then you're ready to turn off the subdivisions and you can try practicing it with just the pulse going. So let me put that on my metronome and we'll try speeding it up. So now my metronome is only going to beat at the beginning of every group. So I'm now in charge of doing the subdivision. So as I listen, before I even start, I'm thinking 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But of course, even for me, it took me a long time to work it up to that tempo. We're talking weeks of time. Don't go faster than you're comfortable going. If you can't play it perfectly at that speed, you need to go slower. But you have many weeks, if not months, to prepare for these auditions. So plan your time accordingly so that you can feel really confident walking in that audition, that your fingers know the rhythm, your heart knows the rhythm, and your brain knows the rhythm. Good luck and happy practicing.